The cell door opened with a hiss of pressurized seals. Thorn expected to see his executioners. He expected bolt pistols and power swords and the cold faces of brothers who had already decided he was beyond saving. Instead, Kalen entered alone. The librarian's force staff glowed softly in the dim light. His pale eyes studied Thorn with an expression that was hard to read. Not hatred. Not fear. Something closer to pity, perhaps. Or maybe just curiosity. They are assembling outside, Kalen said. The execution squad. Captain Varys wanted to do it himself, but I convinced him to give me a few minutes. One last chance, as it were. Thorn said nothing. The Vox bead Festus had left was still clutched in his hand, hidden from view. One word. One word and this would all be over. I can purge the taint, Kalen said. Thorn looked up. He had not expected that. It will not be easy, the librarian continued. I will have to burn the corruption from your flesh and soul with psychic fire. The process will destroy much of what you are. Your memories. Your identity. Perhaps your life itself. If you survive, you will wake as a stranger wearing your face. Marcus Thorn will be dead. But something might remain. Something clean. Thorn considered this. Death of the self through imperial fire. Or preservation of the self through chaos corruption. Both paths led to the end of who he was now. Why offer this? Thorn asked. Why not simply let them execute me? It would be simpler. Cleaner. Because I looked into your soul at the cauldron, Kalen said. In that moment when you hesitated, when you almost surrendered to Festus, I saw something. A spark of resistance. A fragment of the man you used to be, fighting against the tide of corruption. Most who fall to Nurgle do not fight. They embrace the rot eagerly. But you are still fighting. Even now, even with the grandfather's seeds blooming in your chest, you are still fighting. Outside, alarms began to wail. Kalen's head snapped toward the door. His force staff flared with sudden light. They have come. Who? But Thorn already knew the answer. The Death Guard. They are attacking the command post. Festus has come for you, whether you called him or not. The sounds of battle erupted through the facility. Bolt rounds. Screaming. The wet laughter of plague marines. The Death Guard had launched their assault at the perfect moment, when the Iron Hands were gathered for an execution rather than prepared for war. Kalen moved toward the door. Stay here. I will hold them as long as I can. Wait. The librarian turned. Thorn looked at the Vox bead in his hand. He thought about Festus. He thought about the garden. He thought about the peace that waited for him if he simply said yes. Then he dropped the Vox bead and crushed it beneath his boot. I will not hide while my brothers die, Thorn said. Give me a weapon. Kalen studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he drew a bolt pistol from his belt and tossed it to Thorn. If you turn against us, I will kill you myself. I would expect nothing less. They moved into the corridor. The command post had become a war zone. Iron Hands fought back to back against plague marines who seemed to emerge from every shadow. The air was thick with toxic fumes and the stench of decay. Thorn raised the bolt pistol and fired. The round struck a plague marine in the helmet, staggering him. Not a kill, but it gave a wounded Iron Hand time to fall back. Something strange happened then. Thorn felt his body responding to the combat in ways it never had before. His corrupted muscles moved faster. His changed eyes saw things in the smoke that normal vision could not detect. The diseases swirling through the air parted around him like water around a stone. Nurgle's gifts. He was using Nurgle's gifts against Nurgle's servants that he pushed deeper into the fighting. Plague marines hesitated when they saw him. They smelled the corruption on him. They sensed the grandfather's touch in his flesh. For a heartbeat, they did not know if he was enemy or ally. That hesitation cost them. Thorn moved through their ranks like a ghost. His bolt pistol spoke again and again. When the ammunition ran out, he grabbed a fallen power sword and kept fighting. He was not as skilled as a true swordsman, but he did not need to be. His corrupted body could take wounds that would have killed him before. And every time he struck a plague marine, they seemed surprised that one of the grandfather's children would turn against them. He found Festus in the central hub. The Leech Lord stood over Captain Varus's body. The Iron Hands commander was still alive, but barely. Green foam bubbled from his lips. His augmented limbs twitched uselessly. "Ah, Marcus," Festus said, turning to face him. "I came to save you. But I see you have made your choice." "I have." Thorn raised the power sword. "I choose to fight." Festus shook his head sadly. "You cannot win this battle, brother. I have 10,000 years of experience. I have the full blessing of the grandfather. You have a stolen sword and a body that is only beginning its transformation. The mathematics of this fight are not in your favor. Then I will die fighting. You could have had peace. You could have had joy. You could have been part of something eternal." "I could have been a slave," Thorn replied. "I could have surrendered everything that makes me who I am. That is not peace. That is death wearing a mask of contentment." Festus sighed. "So be it." The Leech Lord moved with speed that should have been impossible for something so bloated. His scythe swept toward Thorn's neck. Thorn barely managed to deflect the blow, and the force of it sent him staggering back. They fought through the ruins of the command post. Scythe against sword. Pestilence against fury. Festus was stronger. Festus was more skilled. Every exchange of blows left Thorn with new wounds, new cuts, new reasons why he should fall, but he did not fall. His corrupted body regenerated even as it was injured. The grandfather's gifts worked against their giver, healing wounds that would have been fatal. And every time Festus landed a blow, Thorn struck back with the desperate strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. Kalen's lightning joined the fight. Psychic energy crashed into Festus, forcing the Leech Lord to divide his attention. Other Iron Hands rallied, pouring fire into the plague marines who tried to help their champion. Thorn saw his opening. Festus had turned to deflect Kalen's attack, leaving his side exposed for just a moment. Thorn drove the power sword deep into the gap between the Leech Lord's armor plates. Festus screamed. It was a wet, bubbling sound of genuine pain. The Leech Lord staggered back, clutching the wound in his side. For the first time, Thorn saw something like fear in those rotting eyes. "This is not over," Festus gasped. "The grandfather's claim on you remains. You will fall. Eventually, all fall." "Perhaps," Thorn said. "But not today." The Death Guard retreated. Broken. Defeated. Festus was dragged away by his brothers, still bleeding from the wound that would not heal. In the aftermath, Kalen found Thorn kneeling in the toxic mud of the shattered command post. Black tears ran from Thorn's clouded eye. His changed hand trembled at his side. "The corruption remains," Kalen observed. "I know," Thorn replied. "It always will. But today, I chose to fight it. Tomorrow, I will choose again. And again. For as long as I can." The Iron Hands did not execute Marcus Thorn. They could not fully trust him, and he could not fully trust himself. But they recognized what he had done. He had turned Nurgle's gifts against the Plague God's servants. He had fought when surrender would have been easy. He had chosen pain over peace. They assigned him to the Death Watch. The chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos. A place where warriors with unique abilities fought against the enemies of mankind in the shadows between stars. His resistance to disease made him invaluable against the Death Guard. His understanding of corruption made him dangerous in ways that pure warriors could never be. Years passed. Thorn served with distinction. He saved worlds that would have fallen to plague. He killed Festus the Leech Lord in a final confrontation, ending the creature that had started his transformation so long ago, but he still dreamed of the garden. Every night, Grandfather Nurgle whispered to him. Every morning, Thorn woke up and said no. The corruption in his body spread slowly, inch by inch, year by year. One day, perhaps it would claim him entirely, but that day was not today. Marcus Thorne, once Iron Hand, now Black Shield of the Deathwatch, stood before a mirror in his quarters. His reflection showed the truth he hid from others. Green patches covered his chest. His eye was fully clouded now, seeing spectrums that no human should perceive. Tentacles had begun to grow along his spine, hidden beneath his armor that he placed his gauntlet over his chest, covering the corruption from view. Not today, grandfather, he whispered, somewhere in the warp, something ancient and patient simply smiled that it could wait. It had all the time in the universe, and one day, the garden would bloom in full, but not today. The cell was small and cold. Gray walls. A single light that never turned off. A cot bolted to the floor. A door that only opened from the outside. They called it quarantine. They said it was for his protection. Standard procedure after heavy exposure to enemy plague weapons. He would be released once the apothecaries confirmed he was clean. Thorne knew the truth. This was not quarantine. This was a cage. And the only question was whether he would leave it alive or in a body bag. He sat on the cot and stared at his hands. His left hand, the metal one, looked the same as it had for 2 centuries. Cold. Precise. Perfect. But his right hand had begun to change. The fingers had grown slightly longer. The nails had thickened and yellowed. Green lines ran beneath the skin like infected veins. In the corner of the cell, something giggled. Thorne turned his head. Nothing was there. Just shadows. Just his imagination, but he heard it again. A high-pitched giggle, like a child playing in the dark. He closed his eyes and tried to focus. The iron hands had taught him meditation techniques to calm the mind and banish unwanted thoughts. He began the breathing exercises. In. Out. In. Out. Empty the mind. Embrace logic. Reject emotion. The giggling grew louder. When he opened his eyes, the cell was no longer empty. Dozens of small creatures surrounded him. They were the size of human babies, but their bodies were swollen and diseased. Their skin was the color of spoiled meat. They had tiny horns and tails and mouths filled with sharp teeth. They giggled and laughed and tumbled over each other like puppies at play. Nurglings. The demon servants of the plague god. The children of Grandfather Nurgle. Get away from me, Thorne said. His voice was steady. He was an iron hand. He did not show fear, but he felt it. Deep in his hearts, he felt it. One of the Nurglings climbed onto his lap. It looked up at him with black eyes that held ancient intelligence. Papa says hello, it gurgled. Papa says he misses you. Papa says you should stop fighting and come home. The garden is so pretty. The garden is waiting for you. Thorne grabbed the creature and threw it across the cell. It struck the wall with a wet sound, then picked itself up and started giggling again. You are not real, Thorne said. You are hallucinations. Tricks of a corrupted mind. I reject you. Silly brother, the Nurglings chanted in unison. Silly, silly brother. You cannot reject what you already are. Look at yourself. Look at what you have become. The seeds have sprouted. The flowers are blooming. Soon, so soon, you will understand. Thorne screamed at them to leave. He screamed until his throat was raw and his voice was broken. But the Nurglings just laughed and danced and waited. Eventually, he stopped screaming. What was the point? They were inside him now. In his flesh. In his blood. In his soul. He could no more banish them than he could banish his own heartbeat. The door opened. Thorne looked up, expecting Kalen. Expecting his executioner. But instead, the grandfather appeared, not Nurgle himself. Even Thorne's corrupted mind could not perceive a god directly. But an image of him. A projection. A presence that filled the cell with warmth and comfort and the sweet smell of decay. My poor child, the grandfather said. His voice was kind and sad. You have suffered so much. You have fought so hard. And for what? Tomorrow, your brothers will kill you. They will call you traitor. They will burn your body and curse your name. Is this the reward the Emperor offers for centuries of faithful service? I serve the Imperium, Thorn whispered. But the words felt hollow. The Imperium does not love you, Marcus. The Imperium does not care if you live or die. You are a tool to them. A weapon to be discarded when you are no longer useful. But I am different. I love all my children. I want nothing for you except happiness. Is that so evil? Thorn said nothing. Look at yourself, Marcus. Really look. Your body has already begun the transformation. You can fight it, but you cannot stop it. The only question is whether you will suffer needlessly before accepting the inevitable, or whether you will embrace the truth now and find peace. I do not want peace, Thorn said. I want to be clean. Clean. The grandfather laughed, but it was a gentle laugh, not cruel. Clean is an illusion, my child. Every creature in the universe carries disease. Every body is a host to countless organisms. Decay begins the moment life does. I am not offering you corruption. I am offering you acceptance of what you already are. I am offering you freedom from the lie that purity is possible. The grandfather's presence faded. The Nurglings faded with him. Thorn was alone again in his cold, grey cell. He looked at his hands. The green lines had spread further. He could feel things moving inside him now. Growing. Changing. Preparing. Outside, he heard footsteps. Many footsteps. The tramp of armored boots on metal floors. His brothers were coming. His executioners were approaching. The chapter master himself had come to pass judgment. Thorn would be executed at dawn. His gene seed would be destroyed, too corrupted to harvest. His name would be struck from the records. It would be as if Marcus Thorn had never existed. After the sentence was read, after his brothers had left, Thorn sat in the darkness and waited. At midnight, Festus came, not in the flesh. Even the Leech Lord could not enter an Iron Hand's command post undetected. But his presence appeared in the cell, a ghostly image that smiled with rotting lips. You need not die tomorrow, brother, Festus said. Grandfather has prepared a place for you in our legion. Accept his gift, and I will extract you. We have allies in the warp who can pluck you from that cell as easily as you might pluck a fruit from a tree. Festus placed something on the floor. It materialized from nothing. A small vox bead, glowing with sickly light. One word into this device, and I will come for you. One word, and you will be free. One word, and the pain will finally end. Festus vanished. The vox bead remained. Thorn stared at it for a long time. Outside, he could hear the sounds of the command post. Servitors humming. Warriors walking their patrol routes. Someone sharpening a blade. Dawn was approaching. His executioners were assembling. He could hear them now. The click of bolter rounds being loaded. The hum of a power sword being activated. He reached out and picked up the vox bead. His hand hovered over the activation rune. One word. That was all it would take. One word, and he would live. One word, and he would become what he feared most. He closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he prayed, but as the words formed in his mind, he realized that he no longer knew who he was praying to, the emperor who had abandoned him, or the grandfather who waited with open arms. The first light of dawn crept through the tiny window of his cell. Time had run out. The reinforcements arrived on a gray morning, their Thunderhawk gunships cutting through the toxic clouds like black knives. Fresh warriors. Fresh weapons. Fresh hope for a campaign that had ground on far too long. Among them came Epistolary Kalen. Thorn knew what a librarian was. Every space marine knew. They were the Psychers, the warriors who wielded the power of the warp itself as a weapon. They could read minds. They could sense corruption. They could see things that normal eyes could never perceive. When Kalen stepped off the gunship, his eyes found Thorn immediately. The librarian was tall, even for a space marine. His blue armor was marked with silver symbols of warding. A force staff hummed in his hand, crackling with barely contained psychic energy. But it was his eyes that made Thorn's blood run cold. They were pale, almost white, and they seemed to look through flesh and bone into the soul beneath. Kalen said nothing. He simply stared at Thorn for a long moment, then turned away to speak with Captain Varys. Thorn felt sweat forming on his brow. He had not sweated in decades. His augmented body had long ago removed such inefficiencies. But now, moisture gathered on his skin and ran down his face like tears. That he knows, Thorn thought. He can see what I am becoming, but no chaplain came to arrest him. No apothecary came to examine him. The day passed, and then another, and Kalen said nothing about what he had seen. Perhaps he saw nothing, Thorn told himself. Perhaps I am still pure enough to hide from his sight. That he almost believed it. The War Council met in the command bunker 3 days after the reinforcements arrived. Captain Varys laid out the situation in cold, precise terms. The Death Guard had fortified a massive plague cauldron at the center of their territory. The cauldron was the source of the plagues ravaging the planet. Destroy it, and the siege would break. The enemy would have no choice but to retreat. The assault will be costly, Varys said. The cauldron is defended by the elite of the Death Guard. But we have no choice. Every day we delay, more Imperial citizens die. Thorn stepped forward. I will lead the assault. Every head in the room turned to look at him. Varys raised an eyebrow. You, Brother Sergeant? You have already distinguished yourself in this campaign. Perhaps another should have the honor. With respect, Captain, I have proven resistant to the enemy's toxins and plagues. I am the logical choice to lead forces into the heart of their contaminated territory. Varys considered this. He looked at Kalen. The librarian's face was unreadable. Very well, Varys said. Brother Sergeant Thorn will lead the assault. Epistolary Kalen will accompany the force to provide psychic support. Thorn felt his heart's freeze. But he could not refuse now. It would raise too many questions. As you command, Captain. The assault began at dawn. Thorn led 50 iron hands through the poisoned wastes toward the plague cauldron. Kalen walked beside him, silent as a ghost. The librarian's force staff glowed softly in the green-tinged air, creating a small bubble of clarity in the toxic fog. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Plague Marines emerged from the mist like monsters from a nightmare. The fighting was savage. Iron hands fell, their augmented bodies unable to resist the concentrated diseases of the enemy's inner sanctum, but Thorn walked through it all untouched. Bolts of green energy struck his armor and dissipated harmlessly. Clouds of plague flies parted around him like water around a stone. A plague marine grabbed him and vomited directly into his face, but Thorn simply wiped the filth from his visor and drove his combat knife through the traitor's eye. His brothers saw. They whispered prayers of thanks to the Emperor for blessing their leader with such resistance. They did not understand what they were seeing. Kalen understood. Thorn could feel the librarian's eyes on him, calculating, judging, waiting. They reached the cauldron. It was massive, a great iron pot the size of a building, filled with bubbling green liquid that glowed with its own sick light. Strange creatures swam in its depths. The stench was beyond description, a smell of death and life and everything in between, and standing before it, as if he had been waiting all along, was Festus the Leech Lord. Welcome home, Marcus, Festus said. The remaining iron hands opened fire. Bolt rounds struck Festus and did nothing. The Leech Lord laughed his bubbling laugh and raised his scythe. I did not come to fight you, brothers. I came to make an offer. Your sergeant belongs to grandfather now. He is one of us. Accept this truth, and I will let you leave. Refuse, and you will all die here. He lies, Thorn said. But his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Do I? Festus spread his arms wide. Look at him, Iron Hands. Really look. See what grows beneath his armor. See what blooms in his blood. The grandfather's seeds have already taken root. He is simply too afraid to admit it. Thorn raised his bolter. He aimed it at Festus's head. His finger touched the trigger, and he hesitated, for just a moment, for a single heartbeat. He saw what Festus was offering. An end to the pain. An end to the endless war. Peace in the garden of a god who asked for nothing but acceptance. Lightning exploded across the battlefield. Kaelin's psychic attack struck Festus with the force of a thunderbolt. The Leech Lord staggered back, smoke rising from his armor. For the first time, Thorn saw something like surprise on that rotting face. Fall back, Kaelin commanded. His voice rang with psychic authority. All forces, retreat. Now. The Iron Hands obeyed. They ran, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead. Thorn ran with them, his moment of hesitation burned into his memory like a brand. They reached the extraction point. Thunderhawks descended through the clouds. Survivors scrambled aboard. The assault had failed. The cauldron still stood. Dozens of Iron Hands had died for nothing, but Thorn was alive. Unchanged, at least on the outside. In the belly of the Thunderhawk, as they flew back to the Imperial lines, Kaelin approached him. The librarian spoke quietly, so that only Thorn could hear. I know what grows inside you, Brother Sergeant. I sensed it the moment I arrived. I have been watching you, waiting to see if you would fight it or embrace it. Thorn said nothing. There was nothing to say. Back there, at the cauldron, you hesitated. For one moment, you considered accepting the enemy's offer. I felt it in your mind. A single heartbeat of surrender. I did not accept. No. You did not. But the question now is whether you will fight what you are becoming, or whether I must end you before it hatches. Kaelin's pale eyes bored into Thorn's soul. The Force staff hummed softly between them, ready to strike at a moment's notice. I will fight, Thorn said. And he meant it. In that moment, he truly meant it, but both of them knew that meaning something and doing something were very different things. The Thunderhawk flew on through the poisoned sky, and somewhere in the warp, Nurgle began to laugh. 3 weeks passed on Griffin 4, and the war continued its bloody course. The Imperial forces pushed forward through ruined cities and poisoned wastelands. Every victory cost them dearly. Every step forward was paid for in blood and lives. But they were winning. Slowly. Painfully. They were winning. Marcus Thorn was becoming something of a legend among his brothers. It started small. A toxic gas grenade landed at his feet during an assault on an enemy bunker. The green cloud engulfed him completely. His squad brothers watched in horror, expecting him to fall. But when the gas cleared, Thorn stood untouched. His armor filters should have failed. The gas should have eaten through his seals. But he breathed it in like fresh air and kept fighting. Then came the battle at Processing Plant Gamma 7. A plague marine vomited a stream of acidic bile directly at Thorn's chest. The corrosive fluid that could melt ceramite in seconds simply ran off his armor like water. The plague marine actually hesitated in confusion before Thorn cut him down. His brothers noticed. His captain noticed. Word spread through the company that Brother Sergeant Thorn had been blessed with unusual resistance to the enemy's foul weapons. The Emperor protects, Captain Varys said, clapping a metal hand on Thorn's shoulder. Your faith must be strong indeed, Brother Sergeant. Such resistance to corruption is a sign of purity. Thorn accepted the praise with a nod. He said nothing about the spot on his neck that had grown to the size of a coin. He said nothing about the other spots that had appeared on his chest and back. He said nothing about the dreams came every night now. The garden had become familiar to him. He knew its paths. He recognized its flowers. The rotting trees no longer disgusted him. They were simply trees. The maggots that crawled through the soil were simply part of the cycle. Death feeding life. Life feeding death. An endless dance that never stopped, and the voice. The grandfather's voice. It spoke to him like an old friend. You see now, don't you? You understand. The Imperium teaches you that decay is evil. That death is defeat. But look around you. Look at the truth. Everything dies, Marcus. Everything rots. Everything returns to the soil. This is not tragedy. This is beauty. This is the only honest truth in a universe of lies. Thorn found himself agreeing more and more. What was the point of fighting entropy? The Imperium was 10,000 years old and crumbling. The Emperor sat on his golden throne, more dead than alive. The Space Marines fought endless wars against enemies that never stopped coming. It was all so pointless. He shook his head. These thoughts were not his own. They were poison, seeping into his mind through the wound that would not truly heal, but were they wrong? The assault on Bunker Complex 17 changed everything. Thorn led his squad through the trenches surrounding the Death Guard fortification. The fighting was close and brutal. Bolt rounds and plague knives. Fists and teeth. In the chaos, Thorn found himself separated from his brothers. A figure emerged from the green mist. Larger than a normal plague marine. His armor was covered in bells that rang with every step. A great scythe rested on his shoulder. His helmet had fused with his face, creating a mask of rusted metal and rotting flesh. Marcus Thorn, the figure said. His voice bubbled like swamp water. I am Festus the Leech Lord. I have been watching you. Thorn raised his bolter. Then watch me kill you. He pulled the trigger. The bolt round struck Festus directly in the chest. The explosion should have torn through even plague marine armor. But Festus simply laughed, a wet and terrible sound. You cannot kill me, little Iron Hand. And you do not truly want to. I can smell the grandfather's gifts growing inside you. I can taste your changing soul on the wind. You are becoming one of us. Never. Thorn fired again. And again. Each shot struck home. Each shot did nothing. Festus moved faster than something so bloated should be able to move. He swatted the bolter from Thorn's hands and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground as easily as a child lifting a doll. The grandfather has already claimed you, Iron Hand, Festus whispered. His breath smelled of graves and forgotten things. You simply have not accepted his embrace. But you will. They always do. The seeds of his garden are growing in your flesh. Soon, they will bloom. And on that day, you will understand what a gift you have been given. Festus released him. Thorn fell to his knees, gasping for air. Go back to your brothers, Festus said. Tell them you escaped. They will believe you. They cannot smell what I smell. They cannot see what I see. But soon, Marcus. Soon you will no longer be able to hide what you are becoming. And when that day comes, I will be waiting. The Leech Lord walked back into the mist and vanished. Thorn returned to his squad. He told them he had been briefly separated but encountered no significant resistance. They believed him. Why would they not? The Iron Hands did not lie to each other, but Thorn had lied. And the lie felt like nothing at all. That night, alone in his quarters, he removed his armor for the first time in days. What he saw in the reflection made his breath catch in his throat. The spots had spread. Green and purple patches covered his torso like a map of some diseased land. But worse than the discoloration was the texture. His skin had begun to harden in places, becoming almost like bark. In other places, it had become soft and loose, as if the flesh beneath was slowly dissolving. That he pressed his finger against one of the hardened patches. He felt the pressure, but not pain. Nothing hurt anymore. Not his body. Not his heart. Not his soul, and for the first time, as he looked at his changing form in the mirror, Marcus Thorn asked himself a question that he had been avoiding for weeks. What if Festus was right? What if this was not a curse, what if, after centuries of war and pain and loss, the grandfather was offering him something the emperor never had, peace? That he stood in the darkness of his quarters for a long time, staring at his reflection, and he did not know whether to weep or smile. Outside, the war continued. Inside, a different battle was being lost. The sky above Griffin 4 burned with the color of infected flesh. Green clouds rolled across the horizon like a sickness spreading through healthy tissue. The Forge world was dying, and Brother Sergeant Marcus Thorne could smell its death on every breath of recycled air that passed through his helmet filters that he moved through the ruins of what had once been a manufactorum. Great machines lay silent and rusted. Bodies of workers littered the floor, their skin covered in boils and their mouths frozen in silent screams. The Death Guard had come to this world 3 weeks ago, and they had brought their plagues with them. Thorne signaled to his squad. 5 Iron Hand Space Marines followed him through the darkness. Their silver arms and augmented limbs made soft mechanical sounds as they advanced. The Iron Hands believed that flesh was weak. They replaced their weak parts with metal. They removed their emotions and embraced cold logic. Thorne had given his left arm to the machine spirits long ago. He felt nothing about it. Feeling was weakness. A sound echoed from deeper in the building. Wet footsteps. Gurgling breath. The shuffle of bodies that should have been dead but refused to stay down. The first plague zombie lurched from the shadows. It had been an Imperial citizen once. Now its belly was swollen with gas and corruption. Flies poured from its open mouth. Thorne put a bolt round through its skull without hesitation. More came. Dozens of them. The squad opened fire in disciplined bursts. Bodies fell and did not rise again. This was simple work. Clean work. The real enemy was still ahead. They found the Death Guard at the center of the manufactorum. 3 Plague Marines stood around a great cauldron filled with bubbling green liquid. Their armor had once been white, the proud colors of the Luna Wolves before the heresy. Now it was stained with 10,000 years of filth and corruption. Rust covered every surface. Tentacles and growths burst through gaps in the ceramite. They were disgusting beyond words, and Thorne hated them with every fiber of his being. The fight was brutal and short. Plague Marines were tough. Their bodies could absorb damage that would kill a normal Astartes 3 times over. But the Iron Hands were relentless. They did not feel fear. They did not feel pain. They simply calculated the most efficient way to destroy their enemies and executed that plan. 2 Plague Marines fell. The third, larger than the others, swung a rusted blade at Thorne. The sword was ancient and corroded. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. It should have been too damaged to cut anything. It sliced through a gap in Thorne's armor like it was made of paper. Pain exploded through his side. Not the clean pain of a proper wound, but something worse. Something that burned and itched and crawled. He felt the blade scrape against his enhanced ribs before he smashed his power fist into the Plague Marine's helmet and ended the fight. Brother Validus, the squad's apothecary, reached him before he could fall. Medical mechadendrites extended from the healer's armor and probed the wound. Scanners hummed. Data scrolled across Validus's display. The wound is minor, Validus declared. I am detecting some form of bacterial contamination, but your enhanced immune system is already fighting it. I will apply counterseptic and seal the wound. You will be combat ready within the hour. Thorne nodded. He trusted the apothecary's assessment. The Iron Hands did not lie to each other. Emotion might cloud judgment, but data did not deceive. The counterseptic burned as it entered his flesh. The wound sealed with synthetic skin. Within 30 minutes, Thorne felt no pain from the injury at all. In fact, he felt better than he had in years. That should have been his first warning. That night, after the squad had returned to the Imperial command post, Thorne slept. He rarely dreamed. The Iron Hands trained themselves to enter a state of efficient rest that did not waste mental energy on useless images. But that night, he dreamed that he stood in a garden. It was not a beautiful garden in the traditional sense. The plants were strange and twisted. Flowers bloomed in colors that had no names. Fruits hung from branches, ripe and rotting at the same time. Everything was in a state of decay, but that decay was part of a cycle. Death fed life. Life fed death. Nothing was truly lost. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. It was warm and kind, like a grandfather telling stories by a fire. You have suffered so much pain, little one. You have cut away your flesh and replaced it with cold metal. You have murdered your feelings because someone told you they made you weak. But pain is not strength. Resistance is not virtue. Why do you fight against the natural order? Thorn tried to respond, but he had no voice in this dream. Acceptance brings peace, the voice continued. Surrender brings joy. I ask for nothing but your happiness. Is that so terrible? Thorn woke with a gasp. The recycled air of the command post tasted strange on his tongue. Sweet. Spoiled. Like fruit left too long in the sun that he checked his wound. The synthetic skin had fallen away during the night. Beneath it, his flesh had healed completely. Not just healed. The skin was smooth and perfect, without even a scar to mark where the blade had entered. He looked at his reflection in his helmet's visor, checking for any sign of contamination. At first, he saw nothing wrong, then he noticed it. A single spot on his neck. Small. Green. The color of old copper left to rot in the rain. It pulsed gently with his heartbeat. Thorn stared at it for a long time. He should report this immediately. He should submit himself to the apothecary for a full examination. Protocol was clear about signs of corruption, but the spot was so small. Barely visible. Perhaps it was nothing, perhaps it would go away on its own. He put on his helmet and told himself that everything was fine. The lie came easier than it should have, and somewhere deep in his chest, something that was not his heart began to beat in a rhythm that matched the pulsing spot on his neck. I and the warp, something ancient and patient smiled.